What's your mountain? That's what we're talking about today. What is your mountain? What cycle do you constantly repeat over and over, and you're ready to stop repeating that cycle? What job are you stuck at because of your limiting beliefs that don't allow you to have the beliefs you need to move forward? What life that you don't desire are you constantly living over and over again? What relationship or types of relationships do you find yourself in, or are you in repeatedly that you don't want to be in? What is your mountain? What's the thing that you keep circling day after day, year after year, and it seems like you just can't move past that point? You just can't get past this phase in life. What is it? Hey, in case you have not been here before, my name is Shelomith, and I would like to welcome you to another Detour to Destiny Sunday School. The objective of this Sunday School is to help you identify your mountain, and by the end of the Sunday School, also give you the tools you need to conquer the mountain and finally enter into your promised land and the destiny that God has for you. So, in order to do that, there are two things that we need to do. We need to uncover why you're, well, three things. First, we need to identify your mountain, right? So, if you need to, take a pause, pause this video, and just take a moment to just identify your mountain or mountains, and then come back. And then the second thing we're going to do is we're going to uncover why you're stuck and how to get unstuck. So, moving straight in. The reason that you may be stuck, the reason that most of us are stuck, is usually one of two or both of these two things. The first reason that you're probably stuck or you may be stuck is an unbelief in God and trust in His salvation. Now, when I say that, the initial knee jerk reaction is to think, no, I know I believe in God or I know I trust in God. But when we really pick this apart, you may find out there may be some areas where you may not necessarily believe and trust the way you think you do. And then the second thing is sin. A lot of us are stuck because of sin. So the reason you're stuck is either one or both of these things. So I'll say again, the reason that we find ourselves stuck, the reason we find ourselves circling the same mountain is one, because of unbelief in God and trust in His salvation, and two, is sin. And we either struggle with one of these or both of these. So let's unpack each one. Unbelief, right? So, unbelief in God and lack of trust in His salvation. The reason this happens is because we forget. We have short-term memories. That's why Psalm 78, it talks about how it's important that the children of Israel, that they constantly teach and speak their kids and their kids' kids and pass down generation to generation God's commandments and also the testimony of what God did for them in the wilderness. It says very specifically, let's go there. It says, "Give ear, O my people, to my law, incline your ears to the words of my mouth." And then it says, "I will open my mouth in a parable, and I will utter dark sayings of old, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us." It says, "We will not hide them from our children, showing to the generation to come the praises of the Lord and His strength and His wonderful works that He has done. For He has established a testimony in Jacob, a testimony. He has established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which He commanded our fathers that they should make them known to their children." So it's saying there's a commandment and a testimony that you need to constantly speak, that you need to keep in the forefront of your mind, that you need to pass down from generation to generation. And moving on, 78 verse 6 says that the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children. Here's the reason why: that they might set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep His commandments. So this is saying it's important that we rehearse and constantly talk about the miraculous things God has done for us and his commandments to us so that our children, that they may set their hope in God and not forget the works, but keep his commandments, and that they might not be as their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that set not their heart aright, and whose spirit was not steadfast, meaning confident in God. And then it talks about the children of Ephraim being armed and carrying bows, turned back in the day of battle. And it's very important. And how does that tie into being stuck? Because when you don't forget, when you don't remember what God has done for you, you lose faith. When you're not constantly rehearsing all the times that God has brought you through, that God performed a miracle, that God worked things out, that God, made your enemies your footstool. When you're not constantly remembering that, it makes you not confident. It makes you not have faith in or not keep in the forefront of your mind how powerful, how present, and how involved God is in every detail of our lives. And what ends up happening is when we're not constantly reminding ourselves of the faithfulness of God, how God always shows up for us, how God always works everything out together for our good, all of the testimonies that we have, when we're not mindful of those things, we end up staying in the job that we don't like because we forget that we serve a God who will deliver us. Excuse me. Who will give 1 second. Because we forget that we serve a God who is faithful to deliver us to the job that we really want, the career that we really want, the business that we really want. When we are not constantly reminding ourselves of how God always gives us the desires of our heart, right? When we're asking for things according to his will, when we forget that, what ends up happening is we take things into our own hands or we stay in relationships that we don't need to stay in because we don't have the belief in God and the trust in his salvation to bless us with a relationship that is truly the desires of our heart, right? So that's why it's important because and then you find yourself circling around. I keep dating the same people that it keeps turning out the same way. I keep staying in the same relationship and it's not what I want. Why are you in that relationship and the relationship is not what you want? If you're honest with yourself, it's because you don't trust God to provide better or you don't believe that there is better. Some of you feel obligated as if you're supposed to stay in a relationship or in a bad marriage, but that's also not understanding God and the way He works. Psalm 1 tells us, blessed is the man who meditates on the word day and night, the word of God day and night, right? He shall be like a tree planted by the river of water, and he'll bring forth fruit in the season. Why? Because when you're constantly meditating on the word of God, and when you're constantly meditating on his goodness and how he has provided for your forefathers and your ancestors in the past, and you're constantly meditating on how he has provided for you personally, you understand the nature of God and you understand that this is not what he has for you. And it gives you the strength and the confidence to move on to a better relationship. It gives you the strength and the confidence to move on to the better job that you know in your heart you want. It gives you the strength and the confidence and the faith to acquire the skills and to believe in yourself and know that you can get the certification, that God can bless you with the energy that you need, even though you have kids to take care of, to take the classes and to focus and to pass and to enter into that career space or that business space. When you're constantly focusing on how much God is always showing up, what ends up happening is you have the faith that he's going to show up for whatever it is you want, whatever that desire is as well. That's why it's important to constantly rehearse the goodness of God. So here's an assignment. I want you to create a testimony journal. And I want you to write down everything that God has done for you. I want you to write down everything that you can remember that has happened to you that is good and recognize that it's God who made it happen. And I want you to do like Psalm 78 says and rehearse it. How do you rehearse it? By reading it, by sharing your testimony with your children, sharing your testimony with your family, sharing your testimonies with your friends. Speak everything that has happened to you good. Meditate on it in the morning, meditate on it at night, because what that does is that constantly builds up your faith. It constantly reminds you. We are very quick to forget. So create a testimony journal and read that journal over and over again. And that is the first thing that I want you to do. Or the second thing, the first thing is I want you to identify your mountains or mountain. And then the second thing is I want you to create a testimony journal, just write it down and to read it and meditate it. And I also want you to read Psalm 78 so that you're constantly reminded of the importance of remembering God's commandments and the good things and the marvelous works that He has performed. And also read Exodus, so that you see that miracle taking place, just to be constantly reminded of that journey. Moving on to the second thing that keeps us stuck circling the same mountain, sin. Okay, so here's the thing. It is very true that once you become saved, that God is not a tit for tat where it's just like every time you commit a sin, you have to worry about being cast into the pits of hell, right? Once you're truly saved, which is what we talked about in last week's Sunday school, which is what does it take to truly be saved? So once you truly believe and confess with your mouth, Jesus Lord, and that He died on the cross and God rose Him up again from the dead and everything that that means. Once you truly confess that and believe that in your heart, you're saved. You're going to make it into heaven, right? And only you know if you truly meant it and said it. But a lot that does not mean that sin doesn't have consequences. Just because you have a secure spot in heaven doesn't mean that the consequences and the wages of sin are still not death here on earth. What do I mean specifically? I mean that a lot of you watching may be circling the same mountain of financial struggle because of the sin of sex outside of marriage, because you got child support that's messing up your finances. That's a real consequence. Child support, every time you try to get up ahead a little bit, you get a good job, somebody gets pregnant, that's taking a big chunk of your income. So then you hustle and you work, and then you get a higher paying job, or you take on a second paying job, and then you fall into sin again, and now somebody else who was not your wife is pregnant and child support is hitting you again. You're circling that same financial struggle, that same financial mountain, because the wages of sexual sin that you can't get under control is tapping into your pockets. This stuff is like practical, right? Baby daddy drama. Some of us as women are drained emotionally, always in drama, always emotionally torn to pieces, because sexual sin has mended us or bound us to men who are just constantly draining us and are a constant stressor. And it's harder for us to focus, for us to work on the business, for us to get the skills we need to get the better job, for us to pursue the dream, because of the weight that we're carrying with kids without the proper support system, without the husband. Right? I know some people watching may be like, "Well, I had a husband and it's still stressful," or I have kids and I'm married and it's still financially a struggle." That's fine, right? And there's other solutions to that, but I'm specifically talking about right now how we don't see how a lot of times the consequences of our choices are the reason we keep circling the same mountain. If you keep, you know, um, getting people pregnant and you keep finding yourself bogged down with child support after child support after child support after child support, and it's hard for you to get ahead, it's because you keep circling that same mountain where your flesh isn't under control, right? Another thing, being a thief, being a swindler, being a con artist, circling the same mountain of always having to start over because what you build, it gets torn down because you didn't build it up right. People who lied and got loans, and people who lied and I don't know, did any type of unscrupulous business practice and like that mountain, you're constantly struggling and having to start over again because the way you move is shady. Because that the way you're moving is saying you can't get ahead. You can't just be outright and market the way you need to market because you got to operate in the dark. You can't be outright and just sell and report your taxes the way you need to report your taxes so that you can actually take advantage of business benefits and business perks and because you're operating in a shady way. You constantly got to give people refunds because you're not giving the product or the service that you offer. Constantly in lawsuits, constantly in a legal system, constantly having to look over your back because you're dishonest, because you operate in a way, right? That is, you're a liar. You're a thief. You're a swindler, right? Those sins are keeping you circling the same mountain where you're not entering into the promised land. And if it does even look like you've entered into the promised land, it's short lived before it all crumbles and falls because it wasn't built up the right way. So, what is it that you struggle with? If anything, everyone isn't struggling with something that's keeping them out of the promised land, right? All of us aren't struggling, and none of us are perfect, right? We all sin, but all of us do not operate in a way that's the reason that we're out of our promised land. For some of us, it's just lack of belief. For some of us, the lack of belief is the reason why we think we have to be dishonest. For some of us, it's both things operating together. For some of us, it's the lack of belief in God's provision to provide the husband or the wife that we want. Or that's the reason we keep ending up in these bad situations and having kids with people or children with people that we shouldn't be with. For some of us, we don't have children, but it's the reason we're stressed out. So sometimes it's the combination, sometimes it's one or the other. Only you know what that is. But in order to get unstuck, in order to stop circling the same mountain over and over and over again, it's important that you identify, hey, do I have an issue with lack of belief in God and His salvation and provision for me? Is that the reason that I'm choosing less? Is that the reason that I'm stuck at the lesser job? The lesser relationship that's lesser than what I desire? Is that the reason I'm stuck? You know? And is it because of sin? Is it one or the other, or is it both? Only you can identify that. But once you identify that, so if sin is your thing, right? If it's something where the consequences of sexually being with the wrong people, whether it's emotional, excuse me, whether it's emotional, whether it's spiritual, whether it's draining your energy, whether children and child support and being tied to somebody you did not want to be tied to, it's a constant whatever. If sin is your thing, here's the solution. The solution is to lay your sins, lay yourself on the altar. The Bible tells us to present ourselves a living sacrifice. What does that mean? Let me read Romans 12 so I don't quote it wrong. So Romans 12 says this. It says, I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be ye not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Right? So what does that mean? That means that you lay out before God on your knees. You say, God, I have an issue with controlling my sinful lusts and desires. Take it away from me. Kill the fleshly desire. Keep me whole. Give me the strength to overcome this because it's causing me a lot of unnecessary baggage and drama and weight that I shouldn't be carrying. That's how you present yourself a living sacrifice first. You have to confess and identify the sin and then have a heart to repent and turn away from it. The word tells us if you resist the devil, he'll flee. What does that mean? That means if you resist, if you stay away from that situation, if you stay away from that temptation, if you stay away from meditating on those thoughts that always lead you in the wrong direction, if you stay away from those environments, if you resist the devil, he'll flee. A lot of things that we struggle with is because we stay immersed in the things that make us fall. We stay surrounded by the people who are our sexual temptation. We stay surrounded by the people who we do dirt with, who we con with, who we lie with, who we, do, um, illegal business practices with, right? We constantly meditate on it or we imagine things or we watch things that keep us in trouble. So resist those things, resist those thoughts, resist those environments, and that temptation, the devil himself will flee. That's how you overcome. And then you pray to God for the strength to stay in the right position. That's how you present yourself a living sacrifice. Like you have that urge. That's the power of fasting. My sister and I were talking about this. The power of fasting is that it's the practice of denying your flesh because when you strengthen that muscle in terms of food, water, TV, whatever it is you're fasting with, it carries over, it transcends. So I may fast this week by not, or I may fast for 3 days by only drinking water, right? And my body is telling me, I want food, I want food, I want food. And I'm like, no, for 3 days, I'm doing a liquid fast and I'm praying and I'm meditating. The exercise of me telling my flesh no carries over when I'm in a situation in temptation. My flesh is used to, or I have practiced or exercised the muscle of telling myself no. So if I find myself in a situation where I'm tempted, I can say, no, I can resist this temptation. I can resist this lust. And then my body remembers, oh yeah, the same way she resisted food when we kept trying it, when my body wanted food, I know to bow down because I know she doesn't always submit to the flesh. So in this situation, in this temptation, right, I know that I've exercised that muscle of telling myself no. So submit yourself a living sacrifice. Pray to God for strength. Pray to God to help you overcome whatever it is you struggle with and stay away from it and put yourself in an environment to win. That's how you overcome the sin part. That's the second part or the third part of the assignment of how to overcome your mountain. So, saying all of that, that's really simple. Today, Sunday school is not that long, but that is how you overcome your mountain. So how do you overcome your mountain? I'm going to recap. One, you have to identify what your mountain is. What is my mountain? What cycle have I been repeating over and over again? What job am I stuck in simply because I don't believe that God will bless me to actually attain the job or the career or the business that I want? What life am I stuck in that I really don't enjoy living because I don't have the faith and trust in God to bless me with the life that I want? What relationship or types of relationships do I keep circling around and around and around and around because I don't have the faith and trust in God that's necessary in order for me to believe that God actually has the relationship that's the desire of my heart? Whatever it is, what situation, what mountain are you circling over and over and over again because you don't believe in God and trust in His salvation and His provision? And the way you overcome that once you identify it is, do you remember? You create a testimony journal where you write down all of the things God has done for you personally. Every time he's brought you out, every time he's made your enemies your footstool, every time he showed up and you know that it was God showing up to work things out together for your good, every time he blessed someone's heart, touched someone's heart to bless you, every good thing that has happened to you in your life, give credit to God and write it down in your testimony journal. Read it, meditate on it, share your testimony out loud with your mouth. Because the meditation of your testimony, whether it's a good testimony or a bad testimony, your life mirrors your testimony. So if you're always talking about what went wrong and I can't never seem to get ahead and everything I seem to go at, when that's the testimony, your mouth is creating that situation. You're giving praise to the negative. Your life is going to mirror what you're saying. And then your actions are going to follow. Because if you're constantly rehearsing that, you're building up fear. You're building up apprehension. You're building up trepidation. You're building up. You're training yourself. You're literally coaching. You're verbally coaching yourself to be afraid of moving forward. When you talk like that, when you're constantly giving those negative testimonies, you're coaching yourself into being too afraid to jump out there and to pursue the other career, to pursue the business, to pursue the vision. You're literally coaching yourself every day to stay stuck when you speak that way. You're coaching where there's no good man out there, and I'm sick of men, I'm sick of women. There's no good women out there. When you're when that's your testimony, you're coaching yourself to stay in the bad relationship you are in. You're coaching yourself to keep to repeatedly choose people who are lesser experienced than what you want, because you're constantly coaching yourself by telling yourself that nothing good is out there, right? When you reason with yourself, well, I'm putting up with this because nobody's perfect. You're coaching yourself to stay in a situation that's less than what you desire. Flip it. Write down everything God has done for you. I remember when I was in a racist situation and I got fired from a job, and I thought that I wasn't going to be able to get hired, and God blessed me with another job that was with more pay, and they didn't even check the previous job for references. That was a move of God. I remember when I drove down the street and I was crying because I was sick of living in a certain neighborhood, right? And then God blessed me to be able to move into a better neighborhood, into a house that I love that's beautiful. That is my testimony. I remember when I was in unhealthy relationships and I thought that I had to stay in unhealthy relationships. And I prayed to God and said, God, do you want me to stay in this marriage? And God revealed to me that I was free from the marriage. And it was confirmation after confirmation after confirmation. And God freed me and broke me free. And now I'm free. Testimony after testimony after testimony. What's your testimony? I remember when I didn't know how I was going to pay my light bill. And then someone called me out of the blue and said, hey, are you interested in this job? And I was able to pay it. God. I remember when I didn't have food and my grandma called me up and said, hey, come over here and get this plate. Hey, come over here and get this extra food I got in the refrigerator. God. Write down all of your testimonies, and that's what you read, and that's what you remember, and that's what you speak. Because then your life starts to mirror your mouth. It mirrors your testimony, and that's constantly building up courage. Now you're coaching yourself to be confident, to have faith, to be courageous. Because I'm constantly saying that, I'm constantly coaching myself into when I have a vision, when I have an idea for a business, when I have an idea for what type of relationship I want, I've been coaching myself so much, meditating on the word of God, his promises, his testimony, his hand in my life. Now I have the confidence to take the class. Now I have the confidence to apply for the position. Now I have the confidence to enroll in the training. Now I have the confidence to call and to break up with the person who is not the experience I desire, because I have confidence that God has something better for me. Now I have the confidence in God to wait for the right person to show up rather than grabbing the first thing or the first person that looks halfway decent. Now I have the confidence, right, to overcome whatever the sinful nature is that I struggle with, because I believe that God is going to give me the strength to overcome it, to resist it, and that devil is going to flee from me. The devil is going to flee. That is the answer. That is the answer. And whatever it is you struggle with, put yourself in an environment that does not seduce you in that area. Remove yourself from the people who are the people you are around when you find yourself in trouble, scheming up something you shouldn't be scheming up or doing something you shouldn't be doing. And for those of you who feel like, well, I'm already deep in child support, you can always dig yourself out. Stop the bleeding. Stop digging the ditch deeper and deeper and deeper, is my point. For those of you who are like, well, I'm already married and I did everything right, and that's not the reason I financially struggle. Okay, well, then it's a belief thing. Do what you need to do to pursue the business, to pursue more income, so that while you're married in a beautiful marriage, but you're still struggling financially, build up the faith to do what it takes so that your family has more income. It's still a faith thing, no matter how you cut it. Well, my thing is saying I'm doing everything right. Okay, well, you're not doing everything big enough. Because if you do it big enough, you will enter into your promised land. Why you're not doing it big enough? Because you probably are not believing for bigger. And no matter what you tell me, and no matter what you're saying, I know a tree buys fruits. So if you're not actively pursuing the bigger, you don't believe in the bigger. If you're not actively pursuing the more, it's because you don't believe the more is out there. You're like, well, it's not that. I'm just not motivated. Motivation is a direct reflection of belief, right? Maybe your beliefs has changed, but you've been stuck in the same pattern. That's another thing too, because whatever we do over and over, it creates a pattern. It's like the path of least resistance that we go down. So let's just say you were, in a situation where you didn't believe and you hear this Sunday school and today you believe. You're still going to feel unmotivated for a while because you haven't been active. A lot of times people wait for motivation to be active and it doesn't work that way. The action actually creates the motivation. So the way you become motivated is by acting when you're not motivated because action is fertilizer to motivation. So if your soil is really dead and you never feel like doing what you need to do, you really need to take action. Take small baby step actions, and that's pouring a little bit of fertilizer or motivation. And it's going to grow and grow and grow and grow until you get yourself back on track, back into the cycle of being motivated. So that is how you break the cycle of circling the same mountain repeatedly. Believe enough and God and His provision and salvation. Because when we talk about salvation, we can a lot of times it's easy for us to stop short with salvation in terms of heaven and hell. I know I'm going to heaven, but God saves your soul in every situation. Like He saves you out of the job you don't want. He saves you out of the relationship you don't want. He saves you out of the mundane, day-to-day, boring life you don't want. Like the salvation goes far beyond just where we're going to go when we leave here. So to recap again, how to free yourself, to break free from circling the same mountain, how to get unstuck. One, first, identify the mountains, write them down. Two, then I want you to make sure that you believe in God's and His provision and salvation. The way you do that is I'll put two as the same, or three, you need to create a testimony journal and you read the testimonies of what God has done in your life over and over. You're also going to read Psalm 78 and you're going to read Exodus because when you're constantly reading not only how God has shown up in your life, but how He has shown up in others' lives, it builds up your confidence to move forward. And four, you're going to conquer sin by first laying yourself on the altar, saying, God, I'm struggling with this. Help me. I constantly fail. Help me be strong. And then, in addition to your prayer, you're going to be active because faith without works is dead. And you're going to remove yourself from the people and the situations and the mindsets and the meditations that cause you to fail. That is how you overcome your mountains. Rehearse your testimonies. You're going to build confidence. You're going to move forward and you're going to take the actions that is necessary to enter into your promised land and your destiny. Constantly rehearse your testimony. Constantly read the testimonies of what God has done for other people in Psalm 78, Exodus, Deuteronomy. Constantly read it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. That's what you do. And constantly take action. Constantly take action and constantly lay yourself on the altar. And guess what? You circling that mountain, that's broken. Now, watch yourself move into your destiny. Watch yourself move into your promised land through belief, through constantly rehearsing and speaking all of the testimonies in your personal life and what God has done for people in His Word, and removing yourself from the wrong people and environments. Step on into your destiny. I love you so much, and until next Sunday, be blessed.